At Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. My name is Simba Elijah Charles Caregiver. You're just joining us online. We are at www.metropoletv.co.ke at Metropole TVKE again on all your social media platforms. I am at Caregiver Simba. This is your official economic review. Before I introduce the gentlemen who are joining us this morning for this discussion, let's just get that intro and set pace for 2022. Now, the World Bank forecast Kenya's economy to grow at an annual rate of 4.9% in 2022 and 2023, but cautioned that the COVID-19 pandemic remains a major source of uncertainty to this projected growth. Now, the projection was close to the pre-pandemic average annual growth rate of 5% from 2010 to 2019. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic saw Kenya's economy contract 0.3% in 2020, with the majority of economic analysts forecasting a sustained rebound in 2021 and 2022. Looking at the GDP numbers during Kenya's electioneering period, GDP dropped to 4.8% in 2017, a 1.07% decline from 2016. 2008 disputed elections saw the GDP drop by 6.62%. That's a negative, growing by just 0.23%, while in 2013 the GDP closed at 5.88%, growing by a dismal 1.32%. With the coronavirus pandemic identified by the World Bank as the biggest uncertainty to the growth of the sub-Saharan Africa economy as a growth, how will Kenya fare with the impending August 9th, 2022 elections? Well, joining us this morning just to lay ground to what the election has for us in 2022 in line with the growth of the economy, we're joined in studio by OLUOCH, who's a lawyer and economic analyst. Collins, good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Happy to have you around online. We're joined by Cliff OTEGA, who's a policy and governance analyst. Cliff, how are you doing, sir? Do we have Cliff? Cliff, can you get me? How are you doing? Fantastic. I think we'll be, can you confirm from Richie whether we have Cliff? Richie, can you, do we have Cliff online? It's coming back. All right. Just as we're waiting for Cliff to come back online, we're joined also by David PARSEINA, who's an aspirant, Member of Parliament seat, KAJIADO East. David PARSEINA, good morning, sir.
Good morning, and thank you for having me.
And I'm happy to have you around as well. All right. Let me begin by looking at that GDP growth rate before I cross over to Collins in the studio as well. I'm going to go back to where we are in terms of our annual GDP growth rate. You can see exactly where we've been from 2015 to 2019. And in fact, if you go all the way back, you'll find that our biggest growth rate has been around 6.2, 6.3 as well. That's the quarterly GDP growth rate all the way from 2017 to 2020 as well. And if you look at when we have been hit heavily by the GDP growth rate numbers, you have to go back to 2008 when we did experience that negative 6.62%. During that period, we just grew by a dismal 0.23%. Again, when you look at that 2008 election as well, you only have to compare that to what we experienced here in 2020. I mean, the biggest contraction since 2008 came in this quarter one of 2020, when we did go through that negative 5.7% growth rate, a huge contraction, and we ended 2020 with that contraction again by 0.3%. And we do know why that was. It was because of the coronavirus pandemic. But if you compare from 2008 up to where we are right now, every time we've gone into an electioneering period, our economy has contracted. Therefore, asking the question this morning, do we expect the same to happen in 2022, or indeed we have learnt our lessons and we might get a positive growth rate this year, because the World Bank did put our growth rate at 4.9% in 2022-2023. Collins, going by everything, I mean, since 2008, up to where we are right now. Again, you can go back to 1991, 1992 as well, and find that even during that period, our economy heavily contracted as well when we went into that disputed electioneering period as well. Do we expect that the economy will contract as well? Because the question is, or the conversation is, we need to learn our lessons and sort of separate the economy or the electioneering period from the growth rate for the economy.
We do have nations where they conduct elections, but things go on as normal.
Yes.
And you wouldn't realize if there are elections in those countries.
Yes.
But you know, the difference with those countries and our country is the stage, or rather the platform that we have our politics on. Our politics are so divisive because they are ethnic-based system of politics. And that's why people, rather politicians, really flourish through whipping people's emotions. And it's through that it's hard for us to mushroom economically, or rather for us to keep growing economically,
yes,
while we are going through this democratic process of elections.
Yes.
Even writers, before even the IBC has announced the start of election campaigning period, you can see people campaigning, traversing the country everywhere. You can see violence erupting. You saw in Embakasi, you saw when the Prime Minister, when the Deputy President was, I think, in Kisumu or Homa Bay or Migori, something like that. You see evidence of violence, and these are what scares away investors. The sad thing again about our constitution is that now we've put a threshold for you to be a president. You have to acquire, amass rather 50+1% of votes. If you
yes,
fail to do so, then you're going for a runoff. And so those eventualities, if you have them in your mind, that as an investor, that you sit down and look, maybe these elections are not going to end in August. I mean, we might have a runoff. After runoff, we might have petitions. And now we've set a stage whereby we try testing, or rather we try invoking the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court through taking presidential petitions there. Because, yeah, that is one of its jurisdictions. But really, every time we have elections, then you are prepared for people to proceed to court.
Yes.
And proceeding to court is a whole another thing altogether, because your supporters need to be kept at bay. Rather, their emotions need to be kept alive at this period. Because, as I've told you, our politicians thrive through evoking emotions. And then after presidential petitions, Maraga set a stage whereby you can easily go back to re-election. And so investors are sitting down and looking, maybe this 2022 is really going to be just an election period. And so it's scaring away investors.
Yes.
But the tragedies that we are facing, two pandemics. One is self-inflicted, the other one is nature.
Yes.
The self-inflicted one is the politics, the nature one is COVID-19. Whereby now you see in COVID-19 the kind of mutant variants that we keep seeing every now and then. We've not vaccinated everyone. And so our economy has to react to COVID-19. As much as it's reacting to COVID-19, whereby there are businesses that were trying to resuscitate and come back to life. There are areas of the economy that were trying to start growing back. They are going to be watered down with all those efforts are going to be watered down with politicians. You know, the saddest thing that I keep seeing every day is that politicians are doing campaigns during the weekday, and the stadiums are full of people. This tells you that those people who are filling those stadiums are not people who are working. If your employer requires you to be in the office 8 to 5, you're not going to find your way in a stadium. That's to mean then we have a huge employment rate, a huge youth bulge, whereby you're seeing politicians are flourishing through invoking this unemployed youth. And this is manpower or skill power that ought to be pushing the economy to grow. And that's why I think for us in 2022, our GDP numbers are going to dive more deeper.
Collins, I'll be coming back to you on that, because we mentioned the COVID-19 pandemic and we saw the effect that it drove our economy to in a 2020 and especially in 2021 as well. So now mix that with election. I'll be coming back to you on that, on exactly how you feel that the government should drive the COVID-19 containment agenda in 2022. Let me cross over to Cliff OTEGA this morning. Cliff, same question as well that I want to put across to you as we delve into this conversation. Cliff, is it going to be worse, or going by everything that you're saying right now, that our politics have sort of become politics of issues other than politics of I have to be president because it's my time?
Good morning, Simba, and everyone else on the panel and our viewers. I'll start with a quote, Simba. There's a quote, oft-quoted saying, you know, those that fail to learn from history are doomed to repeat. Okay? So the statistics that you've shown us about the previous election obviously are key indicators to what's coming. Now, unfortunately, once again, we framed the 2022 election for particularly the two leading formation as almost a matter of life or death, you know. And slowly, the political arena is once again beginning to coalesce around ethnicity. You know, we saw the unfortunate comments by a senator last week, and
Yes.
then people went back in history and said, oh, these people have also said this and that. Of course, that does not augur well, okay, for in terms of signaling the direction that politics will probably affect the economy. Having said that, though, we've been down this road before, and I'd like to be optimistic and believe that we have learned some of the lessons, and that the security agencies and the politicians themselves will be able to tone down some of the worst rhetoric
Yes.
and rein in their more aggressive supporters.
Yes. All right,
And I
Cliff.
hope that that's the case.
Yes, Cliff, I'll be coming back to you on that, because then somebody would be asking you, are we running with, I would say, black optimism when everything on the ground is telling to what we've been through before? Let me bring in David PARSEINA. David, do you feel that indeed our economy can actually thrive now in a 2022 as opposed to it taking the wait and see approach that we've seen it take when we've been getting into other general elections?
Thank you very much for the question. I think I want to be deliberately optimistic.
Yes.
Based on the focus of the data provided before.
Yes.
We must realize that I do not think there is anything scary more than the COVID-19 that has been a world pandemic.
Yes.
And Kenyans are yearning to go back to do their business. I want to be very optimistic, and finally, when one time is going to be really the answer to this particular observation, that because the Kenyan market, the Kenyan economy was just reopened barely a few months towards the end of 2021, and Kenyan really are really looking to really recoup or the wasted time. Your economy is going to behave very differently this time round. That despite a competitive election, or that is simmering between call them horses or sides that are beginning to compete for presidential election.
Yes.
I want to believe that the economy this time round is going to behave differently, because Kenyans are really optimistic about working, capturing the lost time. And that for the first time, looks like there is going to be some certain good atmosphere and enthusiastic spirit of Kenyan. Call it resilience.
Yes.
I want to believe that the economy is going to behave better this time around as opposed to last time. We might actually see a significant growth in the economy rather than a slowdown on GDP.
Yes.
That's my observation for
Pretty much. David, I'll be coming back to you on that, because then the data that we have across the board keeps on saying negative to what your optimism is this morning. All right, let me go back to Collins in the studio this morning so we can actually now lay then ground to that. Collins, you do know that the campaigns have officially started, despite the other politicians saying, well, we have not officially started. We're waiting for the IEBC to call on the campaigns. Yeah. But when you listen to what they are talking about, when you hear their campaigns, could you say that they are a bit different from what we've seen before?
Nothing is different in what they are saying. I mean, politics in Kenya is just a case of same monkeys, different forests. Different forests, or same forest, different monkeys.
Let's be direct. Yeah. When you listen to Raila Amolo Odinga, when you listen to Ruto, what are they preaching? Is it tangible that we can take home and say this time around, as opposed to saying I'm going to be president? This is exactly what Kenyans are being told.
I mean, we've been there before. So for me, I'm not really optimistic on what they're saying because I've heard what they're saying.
Yes.
I don't think what they're saying really addresses the issues of Mwananchi with regards to the reality of implementing what they're saying. The economy is still hurting. I mean, these guys are coming into office in a backdrop of the huge debt crisis that we have. They're coming into office whereby they are assuming that they are coming into office with a blank check, whereby they are starting from zero. But really, we are picking up from where the Jubilee government has left. And
Yes.
so even the first year of whoever is going to come into presidency is going to really be continuing whatever Uhuru had left. We are still going to keep reservicing the debts that we had. We are still going to, they are going to actually act on a budget that has been passed by this government. And so really, I don't think what they are saying is going to be implementable. For instance, Deputy President William Ruto has been in office. I think he's been the Deputy President since 2013 to 2019.
Yes.
Now it's 2022.
Yes.
To 2022, he has been Deputy President. Until now, he's still sitting in office. Same to Prime Minister Raila Amolo Odinga, was not in office since 2013 because he lost elections. But he had a handshake. Before he had a handshake, he had promised that he's going to give money to single mothers and we are going to have free secondary school education, something like that. Same to Deputy President. He had promised a lot of things, laptops for students, studies everywhere. He had promised, I think, free education all the way till university. That has not been implemented. And we need, and I said last time, we need to interrogate these politicians from a basis of their scorecard. This is what you've said, this is your track record, this is what you've been able to do, because you cannot keep preaching wine and you're drinking water, or
Yes.
vice versa. We need to be able to see this guy, the kind of rhetoric this person has been saying can be measurable. It's practical in this sense because they've been here before, they've done this before, and this is what they can do and not what they can't do. Now the politics has shifted to, we are saying, we've had this tribe for so long, let us shift to this other tribe. Or someone is saying, I want to continue what the good work that I've been doing, and then in the other hand is saying, I've not been in office, I've been outside office. I mean, really, for me, I don't see strategy of improving the lives of Mwananchi. Okay, let's talk about bottom up, or let's talk about the 6,000 social welfare that is going to the people who are not able to fend for themselves in this country. For me, my concern is really about practicability.
Yes.
And I keep saying, these politicians are doing their campaigns during the weekday. And they are so interested or so happy when they see the stadiums are full, but they're not concerned where are these people coming from.
That's it. All right, Cliff, then let's talk about that as well. Cliff, you're optimistic that indeed things might be different this time round. But Cliff, data speaks negative to your optimism. I mean, Cliff, if we go to the recent past, all the way from 2008, when we experienced that negative 6.62%, growing by just 0.23%, all the way up to what the COVID-19 pandemic has been doing to the economy in 2021, then Cliff, you will point out to the fact that the COVID-19 pandemic, all right, added to the electioneering period, might actually be worse for the Kenyan economy in 2022, going by previous data, Cliff. But then you're saying it might be different. Cliff, what are those telltale signs that you might be looking at right now and saying, Simba, this is why I ride on this optimism?
Okay, Simba. So, look, there's a saying, you campaign in poetry, you govern in prose, okay?
Yes.
And that saying comes from the fact that the truth is, politicians sell hope, okay? Because
Yes.
you're not in office in most cases. Although, of course, in Kenya this year, we have a very unusual campaign where we have a sitting deputy president
Yes.
playing the role of the opposition, and then you have a presumed opposition leader basically appearing to be a number two in president.
Yes.
I mean, that's a unique situation for us. Having said that, the reason why I'm a little bit optimistic is this year, I think all political formations, including even some of the leading lights in the One Kenya Alliance, which may or may not be, a third force, have realized that we have a critical economic strategic problem. And the reason why I say that is this. We've pumped a lot of money into mega infrastructure over the past 10 years.
Yes.
Okay? And you've just read the World Bank estimate for our GDP this year. So there's two questions there. First of all, how does that GDP number, which we are so focused on and have been so focused on as a country, how does that translate into the pockets of Kenyans.
Yes.
Okay? Because just last week we saw another report by the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics saying that 15% more Kenyans have sunk into poverty since 2014. Okay? So there's a big disconnect. And I think the sounds that I'm hearing from the political camps is, yes, the promises are still lofty, but there's a general agreement that something is not right. We've approached it the wrong way. And as Collins had said, one of the most obvious indicators is the amount of debt that we're struggling to service.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes, Cliff, and I'm sorry to cut you short, Cliff, but if you look at these politicians that we're listening to right now, Cliff, they barely mention debt as part of their campaign tool, Cliff. Everybody is talking about how they're going to do everything correct, but when you look at that particular policy, there's no debt, and how they're going to restructure this debt, Cliff.
You see, the challenge there is that everybody's tainted by the same brush. You have, on the Prime Minister's side, it's difficult for him because then he would have to attack his handshake partner.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
He's the deputy president. Obviously, he's been in office for the past 9 years. He has mentioned it once or twice. But again, it's one of those things that is difficult. And this is where politics comes into its own. The average Wananchi, okay, and I'm not saying that Kenyans are not alert or they don't understand. The average voter is looking for hope, you know. And once you get into these very technical discussions, then you begin to lose people's attention because people are desperate. We just said 15% more Kenyans are living in poverty, okay? So the issues of debt and that sort of thing, while they're very critical and very important, I think the consensus around our political debate now is we must do things differently. How to do it, obviously, is still a problem. And I'll tell you why it's still a problem. Because we have not seen a comprehensive manifesto from any of the key leading political figures. And that tells you that we don't have the answer today. And I believe they still don't have an exact answer. And what they're selling now is hope.
Yes. Cliff, but just before, once we come from the break, Cliff, then I'll be asking you, is that where the problem is then? Because if you're focusing on nothing, then from there, the rain starts to beat us. I mean, if you cannot look at a manifesto and stick to that manifesto, then the rain will start beating us from there, from anybody looking at it from outside. PARSEINA, let me get you in as well on this. PARSEINA, your optimism will be questioned this morning. I mean, just yesterday in Embakasi, we saw pockets of violence at that campaign, and it's not the very first time we've seen it, not once, more than once, PARSEINA. And then you say this might be a proper election. Even before the campaigns have been called officially by IEBC, David PARSEINA, we are seeing pockets of violence. What must happen, David, for you to say, well, it's going to be good this time around? Because that is what would eventually trickle down to affect the economy. That is what investors are looking at now. There's pockets of violence.
Thank you very much. I think I want to still remain optimistic about the Kenyan economy and how things are going to look as we approach the 2022 election.
Yes.
Number one, we must realize that for the first time, looks like the political formation, one is talking about bottom-up, there is another one talking about social protection of giving 6,000 Kenyan shillings to vulnerable families. We are also seeing another presumed horse or political formation talking about a 24-hour economy. For the first time in Kenya,
Yeah, I think David is balancing something at his home studio. Richie, is it okay for us to take that break and then come pick the thoughts of David once we come back? Is that? All right, that's fine. You're still watching Metropole Television. My name is Elijah Charles Kiage. Get us online at Metropole TVKE across all your social media platforms. Tiny little break. Once we come back, how the economy is gearing up in a 2022 amid a hotly contested general election. Once we come back.